Okay, of late I have been confronted with polygamy versus homosexuality questions. Okay. Care to share your thoughts on the two? I presently consider both unideal, but I understand that the issue may be a little more complicated than I think. I would love to improve my understanding and hence presentation of the matter that needs to arise. So let's take polygamy first. The question on, first off, you're correct. Both of these situations occur because sin is in the world. Neither one was God's ideal, and had Adam and Eve never sinned, neither one of these patterns of behavior would have ever manifested in the human species. But because of sin in the world, that we have all types of variations from God's design, whether that be blindness or deafness or infertility. Infertility is not part of God's design. They were to be fruitful and multiply. God told them before sin. So there are a lot of things that happen in the world because all nature groans under the weight of sin, and then there are things that are purposeful choices that go against God's revealed will for human beings. So to the degree, polygamy is not something that happens because of biological conditions in the world. Polygamy happens because of belief patterns and personal decision-making patterns. And to the degree that it's a willful and known decision, it's always sin to engage in polygamy. However, not everybody involved in polygamy is sinning. Many parts of the world, in our culture today, women can be sold into polygamous relationships without any willful decision-making on their own part. They're treated as almost property by their families and or others, and so they may find themselves as a third or fourth wife, and they've never made a choice to be in that situation. They're not sinning in that relationship. Now, the power brokers that are treating them subhuman, they are committing sins, whether they're the ones selling them or trading them or taking them and so forth. That would be because it's an exploitation of people, and it's a lack of love. So, to the degree that you're purposeful in this. But I would even give you another example. In my personal opinion, and you can disagree with me if you want, Jacob did not make a willful choice to end up a polygamist, at least for two. Right. Okay, he was tricked. He was tricked, and he would have sent Leah on her way, except culturally and otherwise, it would have been very harmful to do that to her. Would have destroyed, and he would have just taken Rachel the next day as soon as he figured it out. But he was tricked. And so, I never see where God actually condemns him for that. He's condemned for a lot of things. But this is part of his comeuppance. Comeuppance meaning he reaps some of the things he sows. He deceived his brother. He ended up being a victim of deception himself. Had he not deceived his brother, he would have never ended up in that circumstance. He wouldn't have been there. Had he not deceived his brother, he would have stayed home. His father would have arranged a relationship, probably with Rachel, with them, and they would have had that relationship, and he wouldn't have been tricked by his uncle in the first place. So his own seeds of deception originally led him to the position to be vulnerable to that type of deception. But so polygamy, to me, most of the time, it's a purposeful choice. To the degree that it's not, and then sometimes it's culturally conditioned where people don't even realize it's wrong. There are no victims in the sense people are forced against their will. All parties are complicit and voluntarily engage in, including the second and third wife. They actually want that. They want to be the third wife of this man. That can happen in certain cultures, and because he happens to be the prince of so-and-so, and she's going to live in a palace, and he's only going to come visit her twice a year, and so she has lots of reasons she wants to engage in this, and in the culture, she's never considered anything otherwise. So there's no enlightenment in some people's minds that there's anything other than this is the way you do things. And for them, I don't believe God holds that accountable. It's not ideal. It doesn't work out well. They don't have the intimacy of the unity that God wants a husband and wife to have. But again, I think it has to do with knowledge and intelligent decision-making. In the Adventist Church, when people who are in polygamous relationships converted to the Adventist Church in the cultures and the part of the world that they lived in, the Adventist Church allowed them to keep all of their wives because to do so would cause devastating harm to any of the wives they got rid of. Often, also, the first wife was an arranged marriage that was arranged by the parents that the person themselves did not choose and voluntarily entered. They entered under contract. And it was the second or sometimes third wife was the one that they wanted and the one that they gave their heart to. And so to get rid of the other wives would have been damaging. Also, they often had children with multiple wives, and to come into the church and have to displace your wives, you now displace the children who become illegitimate children, and this just causes cascades of pain and damage. So while once they come into the church, they get to keep their wives, but they also don't get to add more to them after that. So that is, I think, a reasonable position in the world of sin in which we live. Well, the homosexuality question is a little bit more nuanced, because you have biological questions of sexual orientation versus homosexual behavior. The Bible's condemnation is about homosexual behavior by heterosexual people. Okay? That's what it's about. People who are not homosexual engaging in homosexual activity. And that is what's damaging. You read about it in Romans chapter 1, they were doing all types of pagan fertility cult worship stuff going on in Rome, and they didn't think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, and they worshiped image made with their own hands, and therefore God gave them up. And when he gave them up, they exchanged natural relations for unnatural ones, becoming inflamed with lust for the same sex. Well, you can't exchange something that you don't first possess. So I can't exchange this red shirt for a blue one if I don't possess the red one. So Paul is talking about they're exchanging their natural relations, which is what they previously had, for these inflamed relationships of the same-sex desire. And so he's talking about heterosexuals through debased worship and fertility practices inflaming themselves with desires they didn't previously have. This would be the same thing we have today in our culture, not through fertility cult worship, but through pornography use. And through pornography use, we can then inflame ourselves with desires that we didn't naturally have, and the Bible speaks against this, and we still speak against this. But the Bible's silent on people that would be called intersex conditions, and I would encourage you, if you're really interested in knowing more about this, get my book, The God-Shaped Heart, and read the chapter, Love in the Real World, where I go into great detail about the neurobiology of human sexuality.